Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&As, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. Will you ever incorporate the zercher squat or safety bar squat into your programming one day? Interesting question. The zercher squat, probably not. Probably not, and I'm not saying the zercher squat doesn't have its uses, but because I don't compete in any sort of combat sport, I haven't really cared about martial arts in a very, very long time. I just don't see what the zercher squat would bring to my training that I don't get from regular squatting and deadlifting. It just doesn't bring anything to the table that won't be handled in a superior manner by these more conventional lifts. On the other hand, when we start talking about sport specificity of training, the zercher squat, like if I were in any sort of grappling sport, all right, whether it's MMA, or judo or wrestling or anything else, the zercher squat's actually a fantastic exercise. But you're talking about, again, kind of an exercise that's a sport specific use. But yeah, absolutely. In anyone who's involved in any sort of combat sport, I think the zercher squat has its role as an accessory exercise, just due to some good sport specific aspects to it. It can just be beneficial to those sort of athletes. But when your training is revolving around general strength, general athleticism, general hypertrophy, I just don't think it's the best choice. And because it's not the best choice, there's no reason I'd do it. Safety bar squat. So if you guys recall, when I lived in the UK, I actually owned a safety squat bar. I actually bought one with my own money and had it in my garage gym. So that should tell you that I at least hold some value for this exercise. I mean, let's be realistic. It is a useful weak point training exercise for squatting, particularly people who have excessive thoracic rounding. They have trouble keeping the tightness in their mid-back on squats once they have built a strength base. I would never recommend someone who squats 300 pounds even consider a safety bar squat, unless it's a woman. A woman who squats 300 pounds, all right, but a grown man, no. But as an accessory exercise, if I started to develop problems with with upper back rounding, thoracic rounding, things like that as a problem when squatting, yeah, I would consider safety bar squats, and also even safety bar seated good mornings. It's as far as accessory movements go. But again, I see it as kind of a beneficial exercise in a specific corrective exercise context. And I think that's where it needs to lay. Or, alternatively, someone who's got an arm injury, who can't get their arms up to the side and they still want to squat, you know what, the safety bar squat's fantastic for that. So for injured athletes or injured people with certain types of injuries who still need to squat, again, it has its role. So with the safety bar squat, I'll never say never. Because, yeah, there's always a possibility that I might find it useful in the future, again, depending on where I'm at in my training. So, you know, that one's a big maybe. All right, next question. Jason, is there anything we can take away from the classic lifters of yore, like Sandow, and applying it to today's training? They were successful and knew just about as much about training as the average gym rat. They didn't have access to drugs or any kind of knowledge of good nutrition. What do you think they did right using common sense and intuition? Were they just genetic outliers? I don't necessarily think Sandow's the best person to use, because by modern standards, Sandow wasn't really bigger or any of that than a lot of your average gym rats today. He really wasn't. Again, and a lot of the measurements on the internet are hyped up. You look at pictures in comparison, he really wasn't. But a lot of those guys you are thinking of later, the 40s, 50s, all of that era when anabolics were much less used, they didn't have access to even the variety of drugs. Yeah, you saw some really big, really strong guys. People aren't going to like what I'm going to say about this, but this is purely my opinion. Purely my opinion, all right? I don't think it's the lack of knowledge that has caused a decline in what people are capable of doing in the gym today. I think it's the excessive use of fluff. I think it's all the machines and everything else. I legitimately believe, based upon my own observations over the years, that people who aren't blasting drugs, machines are really a waste of time compared to free weights. These guys had access to less. They had access to a lot of big, heavy weights. They valued strength. In other words, they felt form should follow function. That was the whole concept from the previous era. And accordingly, because they all trained to get brutally strong and they had to use pretty much free weights and be creative in those things, they didn't even always have the racks they needed. All right, they didn't even always have the racks and equipment they needed. These guys had limited equipment. So therefore, they had to improvise and just train really, really hard on big basic movements. But yeah, ultimately, again, this is just my opinion, but it's my opinion that I think the biggest thing that changed was the advent of machines, the popularization of machines, and people just seeing that as a viable alternative to their big, heavy free weight movements, and just lack of work ethic and lack of focusing on the overall full body strength that has caused a lot of people who seem like they should be getting bigger, who are putting in the time, to not reach the potential as often as a lot of these guys did. And that's just the reality of the way training is shifted. Training has become more lazy, and what's considered to be actually acceptable work for someone trying to get results today is dramatically different than what it would have been back then. And again, and I think the whole concept of machines itself, I think it lends itself to that laziness and that lack of work ethic. Like I said, people are going to disagree with that, and that's okay. This is just my opinion, and it's take it for what it's worth. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I'm trying to rebuild myself up. I was a 6 foot, 210 pounds college hammer thrower squatting 480, but have done nothing but an office job since I left college 1 year. As a result, I now feel weak, fat, and tired all the time. Weight has only gone up by 10 pounds, but body comp is very different. How would you go about gaining some strength and conditioning back in the gym? A friend of mine recommended Bulgarian light, but not sure. Also, would you recommend me cut back to 200 pounds or trying to recomp? Will not be trying to compete, just want to feel healthy and strong again. Thanks in advance. All right, brother. So you're probably weighing about 220. You know what? If you want to do a little cut because you just feel fat, yeah, do a shortcut. Do a shortcut. Go in and relearn your basic exercises. Learn your basic exercises again. Do a shortcut, drop about 10 pounds, and then recomp from there. Do I think a novice program such as mine is appropriate for your body composition goals? Absolutely. Now, to ask, should you run a novice program? Of course. In fact, the fact that you haven't lifted for a year, I promise you're a novice again. Now, that means a novice in terms of progression. You will probably still be stronger than you were the first day you walked into a gym because you built to a 480 squat. Unless you're sedentary and bedbound for illness or whatever reason, you're still going to be stronger than when you started training. So you're going to have better numbers. But yeah, you're going to find that your progression is going to be like a novice again due to muscle memory. Just remember, the progression is going to be high because you will have lost a lot of strength. Take my recent stuff as a good example. I've squatted 508 on camera more than once, right? You guys have seen me do 500-pound raw squats. I lost some muscle in my transition back to the U.S. You guys didn't see me squat anything over 405 for a little while, just from that transition, and then I quit squatting. Now I'm building back up, and I did all my work sets this week with 345. After over a year of not squatting, from just deadlifting, my squat strength went down, right? Taking over a year off from squatting, my squat went from at least still being in the 400s all the way down to being in the 300s, while still deadlifting and push pressing, mind you. I was still training my lower body. So yeah, you're going to have detrained. You're definitely going to have detrained significantly, which means, again, you're going to be able to make really rapid gains. You'll probably be able to run something like my novice program for about 6 months and expect it to take the time to rebuild what you lost at about the time that it took you to lose it. In other words, if you had a 480 squat and you took a year off from training, expect a minimum of 1 year back to training before you reset again. But the beauty of it is you'll be able to get back to it with probably a simpler program than you got there to begin with because it's only been a year. So hopefully that's helpful for you, brother. All right, next question. Hey, Jason, if someone has the same strength on the squat as you, can they progress to the 500-pound squat in the same time as you will, or does you having already done it in your past in a rebuilding phase make your progress a lot quicker? Thanks. Oh, brother, it makes it a lot quicker. It makes it a lot quicker. For example, you guys know that I spent a long time in bed sick. When I got out of bed, I couldn't squat my body. I was fat and my muscles had atrophied significantly. To squat, I had to hold onto the back of a chair to even squat my body for 1 rep. It took me from that time until I hit a 500-pound squat, it took me about 3 years. All right. Now, getting back to a 405 squat took me about a year of lifting. Another 2 years to get from 400 to 500. Now, when you factor that in, that's ridiculous already. Even the 400 to 500 in 2 years is unusual. All right, that's unusual. And that's because I had previously been a 600-pound squatter in my late 20s. So to come back in my mid to late 30s and hit 500 was something that I did in 3 years from not being able to squat my body from detraining. Now, that first year handles the detraining, honestly. But to get to a 405 again, and to be at 405, it took me 2 years to get to 500. For those who don't understand, that isn't normal. That isn't normal. Many guys I've known over the years who got to, say, a 400 squat, it took them 3 or 4 years to get to a 500. All right, that's not uncommon. I've also known guys who, again, lifetime natties who got to 500 squats, who literally took them 5 years to get from 400 to 500, who it took them about 5 years to get to a 400-pound squat for a few reps, and then another 5 years to get to 500. So basically a decade of work. So let that sink in when we think about this. So yeah, I've got to 500 again in a faster time frame because I had previously, a decade before, been a 600-pound squatter. It allows for rebuilding more quickly, just like right now. Yeah, you guys are like, oh man, I built back up to, again, what did I do? 345, paused beltless for 8 sets of 3 last week. That's in a very short period of time of coming back to squatting. Anyone who crunches the numbers on that, if you assume that's 85% of my max, 85% of my max, so if we plug that in a calculator divided by 8.5, that assumes right now, just calculated off that, I should be able to pause squat 405 for 1, beltless. So if you think of that as a normal time frame, 3 to 5 years to go from that to 500 would be normal. That's perfectly normal. That's average. So if I do it in less than 3 years, and I will do it in less than 3 years, I'm hoping 1 to 1.5 years. That's what I'm hoping for. And we'll see where if that happens faster than that. And if it does, hey, great. If not, then it is what it is. But that's not normal. And it's based on muscle memory. So yeah, a person's not going to get there as quick as I am. The same thing with Johnny Candido. He's going to be back at a 500 squat in no time. He had a back injury, stayed down and didn't try to squat anything over 400 for a long time, and now he's building up in the 300s. He's going to be back at 500 in a matter of months. He'll be there in less than 6 months, guaranteed. So again, muscle memory absolutely matters, even if it's been a significant downtime. Like we saw with me previously a decade before, having been a 600-pound squatter, it only took me 2 years to go from 400 to 500 again. It only took me a year to get back to 400 from being completely bedridden. Muscle memory is very important here. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.